The fluorescent lights of Northwood General's third floor hummed a monotonous, soul-crushing drone. For Elena Hayes, it was the soundtrack of her invisibility. At 52, with streaks of silver in her tightly pinned hair and a quiet that seemed to absorb sound, she was a ghost in pale blue scrubs. A faint, almost imperceptible limp, a souvenir from a life she never spoke of, made her movements deliberate, careful. To the vibrant, arrogant ecosystem of the hospital, this was read as slowness, frailty, incompetence. Tonight, the hospital's star surgeon, Dr. Julian Sterling, was holding court at the nurses' station. His voice, slick and confident, dripped with the casual cruelty of a man who had never been told no. "Look at her," he murmured to Jessica, a young RN who orbited him like a sycophant moon. He gestured with his chin towards Elena, who was meticulously restocking a supply cart. "Honestly, it's like we're running a retirement home. She moves at the speed of continental drift." "Hayes, are you alphabetizing the cotton balls again?" Jessica giggled. Elena's shoulders tightened, a barely visible flinch. She didn't turn around. "Just ensuring everything is in its proper place, doctor." Her voice was a whisper, a rustle of dry leaves. "Your proper place is out of the way when real medicine is happening," Sterling shot back, his voice louder now for the benefit of his audience. "Make sure you get the floors mopped before you clock out." "Oh wait, that's not your job, is it?" "It's hard to tell." The small circle of residents and nurses chuckled. Elena closed the cabinet door, the click unnaturally loud in the sudden silence of her focus. She felt the familiar tremor in her hands, the one that came not from age or weakness, but from memory. A phantom vibration from the grip of a rifle, the shudder of a helicopter's frame, the desperate pressure on a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. She clenched her fists, hiding the tremor, and pushed the cart away, her limp more pronounced under the weight of their stares. An hour later, the pressure intensified. A patient in room 304, a post-op cardiac case, began showing subtle signs of distress. His O2 saturation was dipping by a percentage point every few minutes, his breathing just a little too shallow. It was nothing the monitors would flag as critical, not yet. But Elena saw it. She had seen it 1,000 times before, in dust-choked tents and the bellies of roaring C-100s. It was the quiet prelude to a crash. She found Dr. Sterling reviewing charts, a bespoke espresso steaming at his elbow. "Doctor," she began, her voice low, hesitant. "Mr. Henderson in 304. His respiratory rate is trending up, but his SATs are falling. I think we should consider a non-rebreather mask and maybe a chest x-ray. It could be early-stage pulmonary edema." Sterling didn't even look up from his tablet. He waved a dismissive hand. "Nurse Hayes, his vitals are within acceptable parameters. I'm aware of my patient. Are you aware of your job description? It involves following my orders, not inventing fantasy diagnoses. You're not a doctor. You're barely a nurse." "But the clinical signs..." He finally looked at her, his eyes cold and flat. "The clinical signs are that you are an over-the-hill, nervous woman who should have retired a decade ago. You see ghosts in every shadow. You are a liability. Now, get out of my sight and stop bothering me with your anxious fantasies." Elena stood her ground, a flicker of something hard in her eyes. "With respect, doctor, you're wrong. He's going to code." That was the final straw for Sterling's magnificent ego. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. He was a full head taller than her, a looming figure of institutional power. "Respect?" he boomed, his voice echoing down the hallway. Heads popped out of doorways. "You don't know the meaning of the word. You have consistently undermined my authority, questioned my judgment, and generally been a useless fixture on this floor. Well, no more." He pointed a finger at her face. "You're fired, Hayes. Effective immediately. Clean out your locker. I want you out of this hospital in 30 minutes. Your final check will be mailed to you." The silence that followed was absolute. Jessica and the others stared, a mixture of shock and morbid satisfaction on their faces. Elena simply looked at him, her expression unreadable. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by a profound, weary calm. She had faced down men with machine guns and RPGs. A narcissist in a white coat was just noise. She gave a single sharp nod. Understood. She turned and walked away, her limp steady, her back ramrod straight. She didn't look back at the stunned faces. She didn't look back at Sterling, who was already preening, accepting quiet congratulations from his acolytes for finally dealing with the problem. In the locker room, Elena methodically emptied the small metal space that had been her only claim in this building. A worn copy of a poetry book, a spare pair of orthopedic shoes, a small framed photo of a group of young men in desert camouflage, all grinning, their faces smudged with dirt and joy. She ran a thumb over one of them, a boy named Miller, who hadn't made it home. The tremor returned to her hand. Just another quiet retirement, Elle, she thought to herself, a bitter taste in her mouth. Just like they told you. She was just closing her locker when a new sound cut through the hospital's hum. It started as a low, rhythmic thumping, a vibration felt more in the bones than heard with the ears. It grew steadily, a menacing whump, whump, whump that rattled the windows and made the fluorescent lights flicker. Then, the overhead speakers crackled to life, not with the usual calm female voice, but with a panicked male operator. Code Black, mass casualty incident reported. All surgical and trauma staff to the ER immediately. I repeat, Code Black? Through the window, Elena saw it. 3 matte black helicopters, sleek and predatory, descending with terrifying speed toward the hospital's rooftop helipad. They weren't medical life flights. They were military, special operations, the kind that only show up when something has gone catastrophically wrong for someone very, very important. Her body went rigid. Her training, buried under years of civilian routine, surged to the surface. Her mind began running checklists, calculating triage priorities, assessing potential threats. It was instinct. It was who she was. But she had been fired. It wasn't her problem anymore. She slung her bag over her shoulder and turned to leave. The ER was a maelstrom of controlled chaos. Dr. Sterling, chest puffed out, was directing traffic, barking orders, reveling in the adrenaline and the spotlight. The elevator doors from the roof hissed open, and a team of battle-hardened para-rescuemen burst out, surrounding a gurney. On it, a man lay pale and still, his uniform shredded and soaked in blood. IV lines snaked from his arms, a field dressing was plastered to his chest, and his breathing was shallow, ragged. Commander Thorne, one of the PJs yelled at Sterling. Multiple GSWs to the chest and abdomen. Massive internal bleeding, lost consciousness twice in transit. He's crashing. Sterling practically shoved a junior doctor out of the way. Get him into Trauma 1. I'm the lead surgeon on this. Let's move, people. For 20 minutes, Sterling worked with frantic theatrical energy. He called for blood, for x-rays, for surgical consults. But the commander's vitals kept plummeting. The flatline alarm blared twice, each time silenced by frantic work with the defibrillator paddles. Sterling was sweating, his commands becoming more erratic, his confidence fracturing into raw panic. His pressure is bottoming out. Why isn't it coming back up? He screamed at a nurse. Push another unit of ONAG. The lead PJ, a master sergeant with a face like carved granite and eyes that had seen hell, watched Sterling with growing contempt. You're missing something, Doc, he growled. You're chasing symptoms. I am the chief of trauma surgery at this hospital, Sterling shrieked, his composure shattering. Do not tell me how to do my job. It was then that Commander Thorne's eyes flickered open. His gaze was unfocused, his lips blue. He tried to speak, but only a faint gurgling sound emerged. He gasped, fighting for air, his one good hand weakly gesturing toward the hallway. What is it, sir? The master sergeant asked, leaning in close. The commander's voice was a ragged whisper, barely audible over the frantic beeping of the machines. Find her. Find who, sir? We're trying to help you. Thorne's eyes locked with the sergeant's, a desperate, urgent plea within them. Find the nurse. You just fired, he rasped, his breath catching. He took another agonizing gasp. Find Angel 6. The master sergeant froze. The words hit him like a physical blow. Angel 6. It wasn't a name, it was a call sign. A legend whispered in hushed, reverent tones in the barracks and forward operating bases of the Special Operations community. A medic so skilled they were considered a myth, a guardian angel on the battlefield. He looked at the flailing, incompetent doctor, then back at his dying commander. The calculus was simple. He spun around, his eyes blazing with a new, desperate hope. He said Angel 6. the sergeant roared, his voice cutting through the chaos like a thunderclap. "Where is she? Where is she?" He stormed out of the trauma bay, his gaze sweeping the corridors. He saw her then, a quiet, older woman with silver-streaked hair and a sad limp about to push through the exit doors. He saw the bag over her shoulder. He saw the set of her jaw. He sprinted, covering the distance in a few powerful strides. "Ma'am." Elena turned, her face a mask of weary resignation. He stood before her, breathing hard, his eyes searching her face, looking at the faint silvery scar that traced her left temple, the haunted depth in her gaze. "Ma'am, Commander Thorne, he asked for Angel 6. Are you Angel 6? Elena's expression didn't change, but her eyes did. The weary ghost was gone, replaced by a steel-hardened commander. She gave a single curt nod. The Master Sergeant's face flooded with a relief so profound it was almost worshipful. "Thank God," he breathed. "Ma'am, you need to come with me." Now? When Elena walked back into Trauma 1, it was like a new law of physics had entered the room. Her limp was gone, replaced by an efficient gliding stride. Her shoulders were back, her eyes, narrowed and analytical, swept over the scene, absorbing every detail, every monitor reading, every drop of blood on the floor. Dr. Sterling saw her and his face contorted with rage. "What the hell are you doing in here? I fired you! Security! Get her out of my ER!" The Master Sergeant stepped between them, planting his feet. He was a wall of muscle and combat experience. He looked down at Sterling. "She is in charge now, Doctor. Touch her, and I will break every bone in your hand." Elena didn't even glance at Sterling. Her focus was entirely on the man on the table. "Stop compressions," she commanded. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was low, crisp, and radiated absolute, unquestionable authority. The paramedics, responding to a tone they instinctively understood, stopped. "He's flatlining!" Sterling shrieked. "He's not flatlining. He's in PEA because of a tension pneumothorax," Elena snapped without looking at him. She pointed to the left side of Thorne's chest. "Look at the tracheal deviation, the distended neck veins. You're pumping blood against a brick wall. Get me a 14-gauge angiocath and a liter of saline. Now." A nurse, stunned into action by her confidence, slapped the needle into her hand. Elena tore open an alcohol wipe, swabbed a spot between the second and third ribs, and with a smooth, practiced motion, plunged the long needle deep into the commander's chest. There was an audible hiss as trapped air rushed out of the chest cavity. On the monitor, a weak rhythm flickered back to life. The commander's blood pressure, which had been non-existent, jumped to 60/40. A collective gasp went through the room. Elena was already moving on. "He's still bleeding internally. Look at the abdominal distension. Get a fast scanner on him. I want to see his belly." A resident wheeled the ultrasound machine over. Elena grabbed the probe herself, her movements economical and precise. "There," she said, pointing to the screen. "Morrison's pouch is full of fluid. Grade 4 liver lac, possible splenic rupture. He needs a laparotomy and a massive transfusion protocol. Who's the on-call surgeon?" "I am," Sterling stammered, his face ashen. Elena finally looked at him, and her eyes were chips of ice. "Then you will listen to me. Type and cross for 10 units of packed red blood cells, 10 of FFP, and 2 of platelets. Get the OR prepped for an X-lap. Page thoracic surgery for a consult on that chest wound. And get me a full set of vitals every 5 minutes. Do you understand me, Doctor?" He just stared, dumbfounded. The Master Sergeant took a menacing step forward. "She asked if you understood, sir." Sterling flinched and nodded dumbly. "Yes. Yes, I understand." Just as the team, now galvanized under Elena's command, began to move the gurney toward the elevators, the doors to the ambulance bay slid open again. A tall, imposing man in the uniform of a 4-star general strode in, his face a mask of grim concern. His eyes scanned the room and landed on Elena. He stopped dead. "Elena," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "My God, is that you?" Elena looked up from adjusting the commander's IV drip. She offered a tired ghost of a smile. "Hello, General Marks. Long time no see." General Marks walked past the shell-shocked Dr. Sterling as if he were a piece of furniture. He looked at the stabilizing vitals on the monitor, then at Elena's calm, competent hands. A look of immense respect, bordering on awe, settled on his face. "Major Hayes," he he said, his voice now formal, filled with reverence. "I should have known if anyone could pull David back from the brink, it would be you." He turned to the hospital administrator, who had just scurried in, his face pale with panic. "Do you have any idea who this woman is?" the general demanded, his voice a low, dangerous growl. The administrator shook his head, looking helplessly at Sterling. "This," the general said, his voice rising so everyone in the ER could hear, "is retired Major Elena Hayes, call sign Angel 6. For 10 years, she was the senior medic for Joint Task Force Omega. She is a recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross for actions in the Hindu Kush, where she single-handedly defended a downed Black Hawk and kept 3 critically wounded men alive for 12 hours under direct enemy fire. One of those men was Commander Thorne." He pointed to Elena's leg. "The limp she carries is from the RPG shrapnel that hit her after she'd already dragged all 3 men to safety. She has performed surgery in the dark, set bones with nothing but sticks and duct tape, and saved more lives in the worst places on Earth than any surgeon in this hospital will see in a lifetime. She is not just a nurse, she is a national hero." He then fixed his furious gaze on Dr. Sterling, who looked like he was about to collapse. "And I understand from the Master Sergeant here that you fired her." The silence was deafening. Every eye in the room was on Sterling, whose arrogant smirk had been replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "Pack your things, Doctor," the administrator said, his voice shaking with fury. "You're finished." Later, after Commander Thorne was out of a successful surgery and stable in the ICU, Elena sat alone in the empty cafeteria, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind the familiar bone-deep ache. The Master Sergeant approached her table and set down a fresh, steaming mug. "The General sends his compliments, ma'am, and his thanks." "Just doing my job, Sergeant," she said quietly. "That's the thing, ma'am," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It wasn't your job, not anymore. But you did it anyway." He paused, then stood straight and rendered a perfect formal salute. "It was an honor to see you work, Angel 6. Elena watched him go, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. The next morning, the hospital's board of directors offered her Dr. Sterling's job as chief of trauma surgery. She turned it down. Instead, she made a counteroffer. She would return, not as a surgeon, but as the head of their trauma training program, to teach a new generation of doctors and nurses what the monitors can't tell you. To teach them to see the patient, not just the chart. To teach them that sometimes the quietest, most unassuming people are the ones who have fought the hardest battles, and that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to be ready when the call comes.